the Airport Road Church of Christ on June 14th. Is that right? June 14th, 2026. We are happy you're here. We have visitors here this morning. We're happy to have you guys visiting with us in person. We also want to welcome the live stream folks who are watching this morning. We're going to continue this morning with our study of the Tabernacle. This is lesson 2 of 4. And today we're going to consider the look and the function of the tabernacle. The look and the function of the tabernacle. Now, we said last week that the only way to approach God was through the tabernacle. Now, we're talking under the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament times. And the tabernacle was exclusive and isolated by design. Why do you think exclusive and isolated by design? Oh, yeah, the Holy of Holies, which is where God resided, and so and you could only, as we're going to talk about today, you could only approach God through one way, which really, when you think about things that Jesus said in the New Testament, and he's saying it to Jewish folks who at that point in time were worshiping in the temple, but the tabernacle just preceded the temple, basically the same layout, just much bigger. And so when he would say, "I am the gate," now you listen to what we're going to talk about today, and you'll realize, wow, when Jesus said that to a Jewish person, this is the first thing they would think of, or at least the temple. When he would say, no one comes to the Father except through me. Pay attention to what we're going to say today, and you'll realize, wow, that means a lot more. That meant a lot more to a Jewish individual with their context and their understanding of the Old Testament than it ever has to me, really. Now, man was allowed to approach, but he was not allowed to enter God's presence. Okay? So, a perfect God dwelling with an imperfect people. There was still the sin problem. And the tabernacle symbolized the presence of God with his people, and it showed that sinful people could live in the presence of a holy God. It would take time to prepare people for the Messiah, who was and is the final solution to our sin problem. So the tabernacle consisted of many signs pointing to and setting the stage for Jesus and his church. That's why I think it's important to study the tabernacle. Unlike Israel, we have the advantage of, what do we have the advantage of that they didn't have? Hindsight, yeah. And that hindsight comes through what? The Bible, the Scriptures. So, one thing that we want to look at today is the fact that not all symbols are clear. When we, I can think about songs that were written back when I was a young whippersnapper. And everybody was wondering, what does that mean? What is that Beatles song? What are they talking about? And there was all sorts of stuff that people was, that means, John is dead, or that means that this or that. So not all signs are clear. But that's not true when it comes to the colors that are found or were found in the tabernacle. So let's start with the color. Actually, it's not a color. It's a lack of color. White. White stands for the purity of God. The purity of God and the purity of those who live in His presence. Because can God be in the presence of impurity? No. And the color, or let's keep saying it, I'm going to say the color. The color white was prominent in the linen court curtains. Okay? The linen court curtains, the outer court. The next color is blue. What does blue represent? Not royalty, because we're going to talk about royalty. Pure? No. We got purity covered. No. Why heavenly? Sky is blue. Yes. The color of the sky. And a reminder of the heavenly realm. Remember the Jews, how many heavens did the Jews consider there were?
7?
No. 3. Yeah. The sky that you see, that the birds fly in, the sky that's way up there, the blue sky that is, beyond our imagination, and then the place where God dwelt. Okay? So, blue, heavenly, and blue was actually the most used color in the Old Testament. It appears in the Old Testament, or is mentioned 50 times in the Old Testament. Next color is red. This ought to be easy.
Blood.
Blood. The symbol of blood, which was needed for what?
Forgiveness.
Purification, forgiveness.
Atonement.
What did you? Life.
Atonement.
Atonement. That's the word I was looking for. The atonement for what? Sin. For the sins of mankind. So, white, blue, and red. Now, Shirley Ransom, purple. Royalty. That's correct. I heard somebody say it. Royalty. The supremacy of God and the supremacy of Christ. Purple was a sign of the rich and powerful in this day and age, in the Old Testament day and age. You combine what two colors to come up with purple?
Blue and red.
Blue and red. What is the what is the blue? Heaven. What is the red? Blood. So purple equals heavenly blood. The next color is gold. What does gold represent? Wealth, power, status. Okay? Then the last color that we're going to consider, or that you saw was silver. What does silver represent? This is a hard one. Huh? Silver. Hi-ho, silver. Anybody? Redemption. Why would silver represent redemption?
Refined?
Huh?
Being refined by fire and stuff?
No. How many pieces of silver did it cost to buy back the firstborn of Israel? 30 pieces of silver. Numbers, write it down if you're taking notes. Chapter 18, verses 15 and 16. Numbers chapter 18, verses 15 and 16. Isn't it interesting that the betrayer of Jesus was paid 30 pieces of silver, the cost for buying back the firstborn of Israel? Every firstborn male had to be bought back because they belonged to Christ, or to God. So they had to be bought back, and that was the purchase price. It was also the cost for a ransom payment. So, visual symbolism showed the way for man to approach God. However, the tabernacle also vividly demonstrated the separation of God and man, which is equally as important. I mean, don't we think or see or understand the same way today under the new covenant? We can approach the throne, God's throne of grace, through prayer, right? We can be added to His body if we have the faith and we obey. But we also remember that He's God and we're not. So this is the idea that we see visually in the tabernacle. There were three areas that one had to pass in order to come into the actual presence of God. There were three curtains, okay? There was the gate, the tent of the tabernacle, and the veil inside the tabernacle. Three gates, three curtains, I should say. And today, we see the shadow of Jesus represented in all three of these curtains: the way, the truth, and the life. The way, the truth, and the life. Again, I got chills up down my spine as I was studying for this, realizing what a Jewish mind would hear when Jesus made these kinds of statements. Them knowing, again, in their day and age, the temple, which was not exactly the same, but virtually the same. And in their mind, they're thinking, you know, there's a lot of coincidence here. I don't know what they thought. But they would have related to it in a way that we usually don't relate to today. So, the good news is that although we started off outside the tabernacle, separated from God, there is a way into the outer court, a door, colorful and welcoming, beckoning one to go inside or to come inside. And since we have no real photos of the gate, we're going to rely, of course, as we do on a lot of things when it comes to this kind of study, on artists' renditions of the tapestries throughout the tabernacle. Now, these artists' renditions are based upon what we read about in the Old Testament, of course. So, to enter the tabernacle's outer courtyard, one had to pass through the first gate, which was a 30-foot wide curtain, 15 feet high. 30 feet wide, 15 feet high. And the realization of what was necessary to come closer to God became readily apparent to the worshiper. The price of entry or passage into this gate, into this doorway, had to be propitiated or paid for by blood. That means that a sacrifice had to be taken into that door, into that gate, for admittance to be granted. You had to pay for admittance. So this outer court was surrounded by a heavy, finely knit, white linen curtain. Most likely this was byssus. You see the word there, which was and is an Egyptian linen that was purest white. The color white also represented purity. Okay? And it's echoed, if you go to Revelation chapter 19, verse 8, it says that the saints were robed in white linen. The curtain was 100 cubits by 50 cubits by 5 cubits. What's a cubit? You say 2.5? No, that's not 3.5.
18 inches.
Huh?
18 inches.
About 18 inches. Yeah, that's right there. How did they measure? Elbow to the tip of your finger. So it wasn't exactly the same. It depended on the person, the carpenter. But we say about 18 inches. The surrounding fence or barricade of the tabernacle was 150 feet by 75 feet by 7.5 feet high. Okay? 150 long, 50 or 75 wide, 7.5 feet tall. And that pure white linen was a shadow of Christ. You had to go through that gate to get to God. To enter inside, you had to somehow go through it. And Israel was on the outside of that gate, of that perimeter, with only one way to enter. Again, think about some of the things that Jesus said in his ministry. This curtain or fence was essentially, the purpose of it was to block the view of the tabernacle from the rest of the camp. Remember, where did Israel camp when they were traveling? Around the tabernacle. Yeah. 3 tribes on each side. So the curtain or fence was also there to remind them of their separation because of sin. Okay? It was strung on this curtain, this fence was strung on 60 pillars of brass, and it was hung by silver hooks. As we said earlier, silver represented redemption, ransom, or atonement. Now the pillars were made of acacia or shittim wood, sometimes referred to, and you'll see this even in your English versions. You'll see some versions will say iron wood. Very dense, heavy wood. And it was, ironwood was stronger than walnut. It was also insect proof. I guess the termite didn't want to whittle his teeth down by trying to get through that ironwood. And it was covered, this wood, these posts were covered in bronze and then set in a bronze socket. Bronze represented judgment. Why do you think bronze, or where do you think that idea came from? That bronze represents judgment. Think about how bronze was made, created. How do you make bronze? Heat, fire. Yeah, so bronze was produced through fire. And so in order to think about how sin is discussed in the New Testament, and I don't want to, I'm just going to have to say the word judgment. We are judged. Fire represents judgment, and so the bronze then came to be, because it was refined by fire or through fire, it came to represent judgment. Another reason why judgment is associated with bronze is because what was the altar of burnt offering made of? We haven't gotten here yet, but some of you know. It's made of bronze. Because now in some of your versions it'll say brass, and I don't think that's correct. I think that's a poor translation, because bronze has a, you guys are going to have to help me. Bronze has a much higher toleration for fire or heat. It can stand more heat without melting. Brass, not so much. So the altar of burnt offering was made of bronze, where sacrifices for sin were made. Again, judgment. Okay? And there's some other things, but I won't bore you with it. Other reasons I think bronze came to be associated with represented judgment. The fence that we've been talking about was a shadow of the church or Christians connected by Christ and standing in judgment. So let's take a closer look at the entry or the gate that we've been talking about. Only a Hebrew male was allowed into the tabernacle outer court. And even then, he could only go as far as the sacrificial altar, the altar of burnt offering. And as I mentioned a moment ago, he had to approach that altar with his offerings. Now, something to notice or something to note is that previously, man was without access to God, separated by sin. And yet, God made it relatively easy to have fellowship with as long as man had the required admission price. An animal sacrifice under the old law, and faith in the Messiah under the new covenant, the New Testament. As mentioned before, the gate curtain was the only entry into the tabernacle courtyard. It was made of fine linen, dyed in 4 prominent colors. What was the blue? Heavenly, purple, kingship, scarlet, ransom. In scarlet is red. Ransom and white signified purity or sinlessness. Okay? And the beauty of the tent, or of the gate curtain, invited the Hebrew men to enter. Notice, by the way, that there was no gold or silver anywhere in the tabernacle courtyard. Now this gate, the gate portrayed various aspects of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jesus used the illustration of a shepherd and the doorkeeper. So Jesus said to them again, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture." So, after passing through the gate, the first thing the Israelite would encounter was the bronze altar. Again, sometimes it's referred to as the brass altar, but that's probably incorrect, because bronze was a much stronger metal with a higher melting temperature. More suited for the sacrificial fires, which went on, I won't say continuously, but went on often. I'll put it that way. Scripture sometimes names this altar the brazen altar, or the altar of sacrifice. Especially since that was its purpose, was to sacrifice animals. This altar stood on a raised mound of earth, higher than the surrounding furniture. And the method of approach was a ramp used to get up to the altar. You have any idea why they used a ramp and not stairs or steps?
Because they were carrying something.
Well, they were carrying something, huh? Easier to take the sacrifice? That may be part of it. For modesty. Who said that? Very good. It was a ramp and not stairs, so that no one could see under the priest's robes. Exodus chapter 20, verse 26. Exodus chapter 20, verse 26. Combining the Hebrew and Latin words that were used, or that are used, you find the definition. You take the Hebrew and the Latin, it translates into a high place for sacrifice, or a high place for slaughter. Okay? The altar was made of acacia wood, overlaid with bronze, with a molded horn at each corner of the altar. Now, what did horns represent? Horns traditionally represented power. That's correct. And this was also a place of refuge of a guilty person who was fearing for his life, and he could flee to this altar and basically put his hands on the horn, on one of the horns, and await justice by hanging onto those horns. And besides 1 Kings 1:50 through 53, you also see this mentioned in 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 3. 2 Samuel chapter 22, verse 3. Now the altar measured 7.5 by 7.5 by 4.5 feet. It was the largest and obviously the busiest piece of tabernacle furniture. It was used one time a year for the day of what? Atonement, the Day of Atonement sacrifices. It was used morning and evening for the morning and evening sacrifices for the holy place. And it was open for the people's sacrifices every day. So it was a busy place. The altar contained a bronze grate to roast the sacrifices. And there were bronze rings at each corner of the brazen altar. What were the bronze rings for? Yeah, to put the poles through, also called staves, and the poles or the staves would pass through the rings in order to transport the altar. The staves or the poles were also made of shittim wood covered with bronze. Altar utensils, bronze pans, basins, flesh hook. What's a flesh hook? Yeah, you grab the meat with it. I worked for a short time for my uncle at a meat market that he owned. Man, those guys, it was like an additional digit that they had on their hand with those hooks. The way they worked them is pretty impressive. And I never did mess with any of them either when they had those hooks in their hands. I used them too to unload the beef off the trailers, the sides of beef, which is why I have a bum back today. Anyway, these altar utensils, forks, hooks, fire pans, were used to carry coals to the incense altar inside the tabernacle. The fire on the altar was to burn continuously. It was to never go out. It was never to be extinguished. There were no chairs in this part. Well, there were actually no chairs in the tabernacle. Why would there be no chairs? I mean, just common sense.
It's a holy place.
Well, it is a holy place because the priest's work was never done while he was there. He was there to work. And we're a holy priesthood. The priest's work was never finished, so they couldn't sit down. However, Jesus, the last and once for all high priest, atoned for all sins with his sacrifice, and then what did he do? Sat down at the right hand of God. It is finished. But he, this is Hebrews 10:12, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of God. The bronze altar was a place to receive redemption and forgiveness from sin through sacrifices. The bronze altar was a place of death. The offerings, of course, were put to death. It was a place of offering, or offerings. And it symbolized the sacrifice made upon the cross by Jesus Christ. Place of redemption, place of forgiveness of sins, place of death, a place of offering. Jesus Christ. The altar was as far as the Jewish people, the Israelites, could go. I guess they weren't called Israelites at this point in time, so that may be a misnomer. They weren't called Jews at this time because there was no Judah yet either. But God's people. The altar was as far as God's people could go. Past the altar was reserved for the priests of the tabernacle. Between the altar, okay, so we've entered the first gate, and we have the altar. Between the altar and continuing forward was between the altar and the tent of meeting, which was the next room, was the bronze laver or laver, also called the bronze basin. And the laver, where we get our word lavatory, was as far as the God's people could go, unless they were the priests. It was made of. It was made from bronze. Where did they get the bronze? From the Egyptian mirrors of the women who served at the entrance of the tabernacle. Exodus 38, verse 8. The laver was ceremonial, and it was for ceremonial and purification washing. The laver illustrated that nothing impure would or could get close to God. Nothing impure could or would get close to God. The laver, no dimensions were given for the laver and the stand, but later, at Solomon's temple, the laver held 1,600 gallons of water. Okay? Remember what it was called? The laver in the temple? It's called the molten sea. And it was supported on the backs of 12 what?
Lions?
Not lions.
Ox?
Huh? No. Bulls. 12 bronze bulls. Now, I will say this. Some of your versions may use, ox or different words, but I think the correct translation is closer to bulls. And then in addition, there were 12 smaller wheeled lavers or lavers. And the tabernacle's laver was to be portable. Why?
Because they were moving all the time.
Because they were always moving. When the cloud,
Lifted.
pillar of cloud raised up, it's time to go.
Where'd they get the water?
That's a good question. I don't know. We're not
Because they had
specifically
to change
told.
it a lot. They would have to change it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it would get nasty
Yeah.
pretty quickly. Yeah. Anyway, the tabernacle's labor was to be portable. Obviously, the temple's was permanent, which is why it could hold more water. Now remember, keep in mind, the 1,600 gallons, we're talking about Solomon's temple. We're just using that for comparison. As I said earlier, there were no dimensions given. It might have been much, much, much smaller, which would, help us understand that the water was not as big a deal as it would have been in the temple.
But they were in the desert and they had no
Yeah, they were
water.
exactly. God provides.
Yeah, he did.
God would provide. All right, so the priests bathed or immersed their entire bodies when they were ordained. And washing with water was the first step in the consecration of the priest. Exodus chapter 29, verse 4. Well, it's on the board there. You can write it down if you're wanting to look it up. The priests were not allowed to enter the tabernacle or approach the bronze altar to minister without washing their hands and feet. Why do you think that would be? Probably because the sacrifices that they had made left a lot of blood in that area before they got to the bronze altar of labor. And by the way, forgetting or ignoring that obligation to cleanse their hands and feet was punishable by a slap on the hand,
Probably dead.
by death. Exodus 30, verses 19 through 31. The psalmist writes, "Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name." Now remember, we said there were 3 gates to the tabernacle. And we looked at the first gate and how colorful and ornate it was. But the closer to the Holy of Holies that you got, which is the place where God dwelt, the more ornate, the more expensive, the more elaborate, the more beautiful the objects became. Beyond the bronze laver, only the priests were allowed to enter the tabernacle itself. There was a curtain serving as the second door of a section called the holy place. In that room, priests would perform daily chores, which we'll examine shortly. Not today, because we're about out of time. That curtain, this second curtain, served as a barrier, not permitting those to enter in. Again, any non-priests that enter in that second barrier, what was the penalty? Death. So the curtain, this curtain, the second curtain, was the reverse of the courtyard curtain. It was twice as high and half as wide. Twice as high, half as wide. 15 feet wide, 30 feet high. And we're going to have to stop there, and we'll pick it up here next week. We'll finish this lesson. It won't take much longer, and then we'll proceed with lesson number 3. I'm going to get through this in 4 weeks, if it kills you. Thank you for being here today.
Weren't we all done?
I hope you'll stick around, folks that are watching.